by Writers, the stories that made us who we are.
Yes, welcome back to Raised by Writers. How can 7 days go so fast? We've got another jam-packed show for you today. I'm going to be joined in just a little bit by Caroline Scott from EmpathyLab. She's going to be recommending a new book from the Read for Empathy collection. My guest today is the absolutely fantastic Karl Nova, hip-hop artist extraordinaire. He's going to be talking about his choices from his childhood reading. And we've got a brand new teacher as well, Victoria, recently qualified. She's going to be delving into her own childhood bookshelf. So let's get cracking, shall we? But before we get to any of those things, it is time to kick off proceedings, as ever, with my choice from my childhood bookshelf, first of all. And this week, I'm going to go with Ramona Forever by Beverly Cleary. Now, this is part of the Ramona series of books, but this one particularly, I remember reading when I was in equivalent year 6. So this was in Mr. Palmer's classroom. I picked this out of the reading corner. It's one of those books that I never, ever saw gender particularly towards books when I was a kid. And yet somebody said to me as an adult, oh, I thought they were books for girls. And I was like, well, you know, maybe this sort of says something about me, that I was just reading books. I was just devouring literature. It's set in America, and Ramona is a troublesome child in that she's a little precocious. And I think I maybe saw a little bit of myself in her there. She is a member of the Quimby household. She has issues sometimes. She falls out with her big sister, Beezus. And this particular book shows that a lot of changes happen in Ramona's life. Her best friend, his uncle, arrives and has a romantic relationship with a member of her family. There's a baby that arrives on the way as well, a little young lad called Algernon. And it's one of those books where you see the character of Ramona really starting to develop from sort of being this young girl who everybody thinks is the baby to suddenly being forced to grow up a little bit. And I love that. And there was all sorts of things within this book that really kind of made me curious about America and made me curious about, you know, being a kid and about what it was like being a teenager when we were going to grow up one day. 11-year-old me was absolutely fascinated by this. So this was a book that was published by Puffin. It's Ramona Forever by Beverly Cleary, and it's the choice from my children's bookshelf this week. Okie dokie. Right, it is time to take our weekly dip into the Read for Empathy collection. And I'm delighted today to be joined by Caroline Scott, who is co-founder of EmpathyLab. She was a former PE teacher nonetheless, who was a head of year and a specialist in inclusion in schools. Scotty, how are you doing?
Oh, Paul, I'm doing fine. I'm enjoying the summer. I'm enjoying my retirement. I'm enjoying my granddaughter. And I'm loving the children's books that I'm reading to her, of course.
Well, this is the thing, is that you've now got this unique perspective in that not only are you involved in EmpathyLab in terms of the way that things like the collection come together and the way that the schools program runs as a consultant, but also, you know, you get this unique perspective that you're at the coalface with a child regularly reading these books. I mean, I think I'm a little bit jealous. I don't have a tiny tot at the moment to be able to talk to. How are those story times, just on a personal level?
Oh, it's magical, isn't it?
Mm.
And I think it's so important as an adult to switch off your adultness and just share, just have this meeting point with this wonderful perception of a child when they read a book. I mean, I was reading a book the other day, and it was actually about a cat.
Of course.
And Florence, who is my granddaughter, said, "Do cats dream?" So I said, "Oh, well, I don't know. I expect so. What do you think they dream about? I wonder what they dream about." And we went off on this extraordinary journey of animals dreaming, which ended up with me actually doing some research into, do spiders dream? And you'll be pleased to hear they do.
Do they really? See, I was pretty certain about the cats, because we have 2 cats, 2 dogs, and the cats regularly will fight things in their dreams, and the dogs actively whimper and bark at things in their dreams. Yeah. So I'm delighted to know that spiders are doing that too. I mean, I don't know what they're dreaming of, but you know, we'll get to that later.
But I just it takes you down these journeys. If you can share this extraordinary reading moment with a person, any person, but with a child in particular, I am biased, obviously.
Hopefully they're dreaming of a nice quiet coexistence with the rest of humanity. That's
exactly,
you know, and if it's anything but, I don't want to know. Now, as ever with these conversations, we've gone down a rabbit hole, or a spider's hole, in fact, in this particular case. But you're going to be telling us about one of the brilliant books in this year's collection, and actually it's part of such a great series of books that we can't help but talk about the rest of the series either, can we?
This is true. My Florence is a huge fan of Luna.
Okay.
And Luna features in this year's collection in Luna Loves Gardening. And it's a character created by Joseph Coelho, beautifully, beautifully illustrated by Fiona Lumbars. And I just find, as an adult, the covers are so attractive. When I'm reading with Florence, it takes us 10 minutes to get past the cover.
Well, of course. We had this conversation last week with Catherine Johnson. She was saying that actually the book covers are the thing that drive you. We always say, don't judge a book by its cover. And yet that's how we access the book. It's the portal to the book, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, we had to get the gardening encyclopedia things because we are gardeners in this household. So we had to get all the gardening books out to identify all the beautiful flowers that Fiona had put on the cover of Luna Loves Gardening. And Florence loves the story because she loves gardening. She identifies very clearly with Luna, which makes that characterization that's so important when you're sharing reading so much easier in the first instance, because she's right there with this character who's full of imagination and life and pizzazz. And that's our Florence. She is the same.
And I think I mean, Joseph Coelho obviously is a former children's laureate. So he's, you know, it's one of the things I think he was chosen for that year, is that he manages to create children's characters who are inquisitive, who want to find out about the world. And Luna does that throughout the series, doesn't she?
Yes. And he never uses, he never dumbs down the language. I mean, I'm thinking in particular of, there's one in the series called Luna Loves Art. And they go to the Tate and they talk about abstract paintings. They talk about Rousseau and modernists, and those are words in that book. So you then get a child who is incredibly curious and involved in the story saying, what does that mean? What's that word?
Yeah, children are amazing at that, aren't they? Grabbing hold of concepts that adults really can't. I love going to visit nursery schools and saying, does anybody speak ancient Latin? And they all go, what? Like that. And then you say, okay, name 5 dinosaurs. And they go, Triceratops, Velociraptor, and all of these words, which we teach to tiny little children, are these ancient languages that nobody really understands anymore. But at the same time, they've managed to grasp hold of because they've got the concept of the dinosaur in their head.
And essentially also, I find that Joseph, some authors are so clever, aren't they, at weaving a story and then giving a character a unique part to play in it. And there are several characters in Joseph's stories that are in need of awareness. And Luna provides that awareness, so she's a hero in our household.
Yeah, I think so, and I think she deserves to be up there on our bookshelf that we're creating of these fantastic books. So that was going to go in as our recommendation for this week. Caroline Scotty, to your friends, thank you very much indeed for joining us today.
That's a pleasure, Paul. Always a pleasure to talk about books.
Indeed. And so we come to my guest today. Now, he is a man of many talents, born in London, but raised in both the UK and Nigeria. So he has a very unique perspective on life. He's an author, he's a hip hop artist, and a poet whose debut collection won the CLIPPA Award for Poetry in 2018. In 2020, he was given the Ruth Rendell Award for his outstanding contribution to raising literacy levels in the UK. He's an ambassador for National Poetry Day. And he's also a lifelong Arsenal fan, but sadly there isn't much we can do about that. I am, of course, talking about the brilliant Karl Nova. How you doing, Karl?
Hello, thank you so much for having me on your show. What an intro! Thank you.
Well, you did all those things. It's not. It's only me reading them out. It's you did all the hard work on that. I think.
I don't even think of it. Like I just moving on.
I was just doing stuff, and they gave me some things, and then I'm doing more stuff. This is how life works. Basically. Now, welcome to the podcast, and we're talking about our books that we read, as children or as young people growing up in the world. Now, so I always try to establish the sort of decade or so that these books that you've chosen. So we're talking about your teenage books today. So when are we talking? 80s, 90s sort of time?
So it's interesting because the books I'm going to talk about were kind of recommended to me by the older people in my life. So the 90s going into the 2000s.
Yeah.
But these books, I think, are older than the 90s. But I read them in the 90s. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always because we've sort of been pegging, sort of depending on how old an author is when we've been speaking to them. This we speak to some authors and they go, well, of course we weren't talking about the Gruffalo. There wasn't a Gruffalo in existence, so it didn't, it just didn't make any sense. But that gives us another perspective on things. And these three books that you've chosen, very very different stories. Now we're going to start off. Do you want to tell me about Things Fall Apart first of all? Because this is I'm fascinated by your story behind this. All right.
So Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart is an African classic, a Nigerian classic. And the reason why I chose this book is I did read it in my kind of early teens. Now you have to understand, even though I was born in London, I moved to Nigeria under very interesting circumstances at the age of 7.5. So when I moved to Nigeria, I was living in Lagos, and Lagos is a Yoruba part of Nigeria. But my family, my dad, every one of us are from the eastern parts where the Igbo people come from. Okay. And Chinua Achebe is an Igbo author writing about Igbo things, specifically about how, colonial things changed the culture of the Igbo people and Nigeria as a whole. So it's hitting me in all directions. I'm a London boy, British-born person being raised in Nigeria under a very British Nigerian dad. I'm reading this book, learning about my culture, learning about our ways, learning about how we encountered the British people of old, and I'm coming from Britain. So all this is just hitting my brain like, whoa, wait, what is going on? Is this how this happened? And the way he wrote was so accessible. He didn't dumb it down, but he wrote in a way that gave me access to all the themes, to all the history, and it was very entertaining. And quite a tragic story, to be honest, but I was fascinated. I was like, wow, I get myself a bit better. It helped my identity as a British, Nigerian, Igbo person. I was never Nigerian enough for Nigerians. And when I came back to Britain later on, I don't think for some people I'm British enough for British people. So it's a book that helped me navigate all these different sides of myself as a person. So
it's really interesting what you were saying there about particular, areas of Nigeria and it being the particularly about the Igbo experience. And we always make this assumption when somewhere is kind of distant from us and we other it, and we I would have packaged gone, oh, well, it's Nigeria. That's what Nigeria is like. But actually, in the same way that the people in Manchester are having a very different experience from those in Brighton and those in Aberdeen, those they're very different lives. And books like this can open up that kind of that treasure trove inside of actually, there's more to unpack than just being Nigerian. There are all sorts of experiences here.
I mean, Nigeria is a very interesting country because, believe it or not, I know this is going to sound wild to somebody, but there are over 300 different languages spoken in Nigeria. There's so many smaller ethnic groups. Now, there are three large ones: the Hausas to the north, the Yoruba people to the west, and us Igbo people to the east. We're the largest ethnic groups, but there are over 300 other ones. So the whole Nigerian idea is a whole other thing to go into. But yeah, the experience of the Igbo people is very personal to me because that's where we're from. But I was living in Lagos, which is Yoruba land, and even there I was othered sometimes. Once they know I'm Igbo, certain people, they'll be like, oh, you're Igbo. And it's a thing, it's a separation. Right. So it helped me to understand myself and understand a bit more history in a very entertaining way.
And that sort of brings us on to your second book in terms of understanding history and understanding, whilst in Nigeria, born in the UK, and reading now about an American experience, and particularly re-establishing your opinions and understanding of a historical figure, because the biography of Malcolm X is your second choice.
Listen, this book, I read this book probably just before I watched the film, so which was a good thing, because I always think books most times are better than film. So I'm already into hip hop music, and sometimes you hear the rappers I listen to, they would reference Malcolm X by any means necessary, or he's militant, and I'm like, what is it with this guy? And the way it was painted to me, he was the bad guy and Martin Luther King was the good guy. He's the peaceful one to follow. He believes in non-violence. He's the guy. And then Malcolm X is the militant one. Don't follow him. He's the bad guy. But when I read that book, it was like, wow. It even made me understand African-American culture and history a bit. So even the rap songs made more sense. I understood why some of it is angry, or why they talked about certain issues, like maybe police brutality, racism, things like that. It just opened up my mind. And then I was less judgmental towards Malcolm X. I understood where he was coming. In fact, he went through an evolution in his life up until he died. So by the time he was getting to the end of his short life, unfortunately, he was becoming less entrenched in certain beliefs he had. He was not as, I don't know how to put it, anti-white in the way he was in the beginning. He was changing, he was evolving. And as I was reading, I was evolving in my thinking. So as a teenager, scales fell off my eyes and I was like, wow, you need to be less judgmental about people until you actually get to know them a bit better, whether they're African-American, white, Asian. You need to take time to get to know someone, Absolutely.
And when you were reading it as well, I mean, you were saying you were making that link to hip hop in particular, and we'll go into that because, of course, that's a huge strand of your work. Now, do you think it is that, I will admit to you, I can't remember an NWA or a Public Enemy song where they do go, oh yeah, Dr. King, let's talk about him for a little bit. It is all Malcolm X. Is it that we've kind of pitted them against each other and he's the slightly cooler one of the two? Is that what?
Well, this is the thing. I think in American history, because of the way Malcolm X was so militant, he is not as, revered or praised or put on a pedestal like Martin Luther King is. I mean, Martin Luther King got his own statue. He's got his own holiday.
Yeah.
In America, he's the good guy, the good black guy. And Malcolm X is the militant, streets, boots on the ground, guy. So I guess to black men especially, he's the cooler guy. He's the cooler guy. And after reading his book and watching his films and listening to his speeches, I can understand. But even then, it's not as black and white as it's painted. They were friends. They knew each other. They might have not had agreement on all issues, but they knew each other, respected each other, and had a friendship that I didn't even know about. I mean, so it's very interesting. But yeah, to your point, in hip hop, you never hear them go Martin Luther King. I mean, you do hear them use, he had a dream. Martin Luther King had a dream. You hear that rhyme a lot. But the cooler guy in hip hop was the Malcolm X guy. Public Enemy. I mean, there's a group called X-Clan. X-Clan, for goodness sake. Who knows? Maybe they got their name from Malcolm X. So Malcolm X was the cooler guy. You see, after reading his book, because he went to prison, and in prison is when he did all his reading. So Malcolm X was actually a thinker. It's just that he's seen as the action guy.
Yeah.
And Martin Luther King is the non-violent, thoughtful guy. But they're actually both great thinkers. That's a funny thing.
And your work, your hip hop work in particular, do you find that those experiences of reading the two books we've spoken about so far, for example, right? Do you find that those experiences, they start to come into your lyrics? They start to come into the words that arrive on the page?
So there's no way I can talk about my journey as a hip hop artist without mentioning a very important person. When I was younger, I was very fortunate to have the presence of my older cousin, who is a man already when I was a teen. He's a PhD holder in the University of Cork in Ireland. So he's always been that very intellectual guy. He was almost like my mentor, teaching me things. So he would always steer me into the positive, more conscious, more fun, more inspirational hip-hop guys. So that's why I guess in my writing, I never came out trying to be like the bad boy, the thug and everything. He was steering me, like, you can be fun, you can be cool, but remember some things, like think deeper about things, have a critical mind. So that comes out in my lyrics. When I write, I'm writing from a place of, I guess, trying to be positive or inspirational or conscious of the world in a different way. I guess I always have my cousin's hand on my shoulder, even though he's not here. He lives in Ireland somewhere, but that's what helped my lyrics. So groups like De La Soul, A Tribe Called Quest, artists like Mos Def, Talib Kweli, The Roots.
Can I throw Arrested Development in there? Because I love
Arrested Development. You see, these are the people that I'm looking at like, oh, so I don't have to be this other type of guy. I can make good music with positive themes. This is good. So my cousin steered me in that direction. So it comes out in my writing. Same thing with the whole Things Fall Apart thing as well, because there's the Nigerian part of my story that I include in what I write.
It is been fascinating when I've been talking to authors about how there's little moments of that kind of literary diet that you had when you were younger. It's
a big thing.
Yeah, they both inform you, and you're sort of drawn to them at the same time. So you're almost kind of meeting them halfway. It's like, I'm interested in what's being said here, and actually I'm going to take something from it too. It's taken you a long way. Now. And this is the worst segue I'm ever going to do on this podcast. And in fact, it's taken you so far, Karl, you could go tell it on the mountain. I mean, honestly, I can't have set that up any better. Tell me about this James Baldwin book, because it's clearly one. When you were telling me, you was like, I saw your eyes light up, and it was like, I've got a story here. Oh my goodness!
One of the best things. I'm going to have to just credit my dad and my mom for my reading experience. So my mom, when I was younger, up until 7, until when she took me to live in Nigeria with my dad, and I was separated from her for 14 years. So my dad noticed at some point in my teenage years, I was always around a lot of church youth groups. Now, church youth group meetings was like my youth group. We didn't have youth group where we could go play snooker or video games. We had Salvation Army. We had churches that would open their buildings to young people to just meet, hang out, and then they'll try to preach their religion to us and stuff. So that's where I encountered a lot of friends I made, and music, because I used to sing in the choir in the youth group. So I think my dad noticed me being part of church. Like, I always want to go to hang out with my friends, because that's where my friends were. And he was worried, as a very Catholic man, that I was being pulled into these Pentecostal churches that, in his view, were just like businesses out to dupe people and stuff. Because I couldn't keep away. My friends were there. The music was exciting. So one day he called me to his room and he was like, "Karl, there's a book I want you to read." And I was like, okay. Sometimes his recommendations are good. Sometimes his recommendations are not good. He tried to make me read some Shakespeare books too early. I wasn't ready. He tried to make me to read some Wole Soyinka books. Wole Soyinka is like probably the only Nigerian to win a Nobel Prize for literature. But his books were not accessible to the young mind I was in at that time. But he was like, "You need to read this book, Go Tell It on the Mountain by James Baldwin." So I was like, okay. So I now read it. And when I'm reading it, I'm like, oh, I understand. Because that is his book about his journey in religion and out of religion. So I guess the message my dad is trying to tell me is, you better get out of this stuff. But what struck me is the way James Baldwin writes.
Yeah.
What a poetic... He has a style that is amazing. I was like, what kind of guy is this? So that led me to his other books like Fire Next Time, Notes of a Native Son, and Giovanni's Root, all these other books he wrote. So that book was very key for me. It hit me on different levels, but the style, the way he puts his words together, his thought process. And then I'm beginning to now analyze America and history better through the eyes of James Baldwin. Till this day, is a foundational part of my writing. I want to write like James Baldwin. I want to be like him.
See, look, your dad gave you that book as a life lesson, not with that life lesson in mind. And then suddenly you're like, actually, I've taken something else from it. I'm going to run away with that.
Yeah, I think he gave it to me for reasons that maybe, I don't want to lose my son to religion. Kind of like one of the people in Things Fall Apart. One of the characters, one of Okonkwo is the main character in Things Fall Apart, who felt he lost his child to this new religion. Similar themes, but it didn't hit me that way. All that hit me was the captivating way James Baldwin writes and thinks. I was till today. I got a special copy in my library here of books. James Baldwin's writing, amazing. Beale Street, all of it, amazing.
And I mean, look, there were other books as well that you were mentioning that, because I've restricted all my poor authors to 3, right? And they've gone, this is impossible. I didn't just read 3 books. And you were talking about this wide variety, Nancy Drew books and this kind of adventure stories that you were talking about and all those things. They were all part of the mix as well. It wasn't, it wasn't
just these serious. I'm giving you the serious teenager reading phase, but honestly, if you were to ask me my favorite books from younger time, so let me give you some honorable mentions. I know we're sticking to 3. C.S. Lewis' Chronicles of Narnia was big in my very young reading life from 7. Because when my mother dropped me off in Nigeria to live with my dad, the books that were in my hand at that time were the Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, but then also mystery books, 3 Investigators, Hardy Boys, Nancy Drew. There was a series called Race Against Time. All these like adventure books does something to your imagination that sticks with me till today.
It is odd. I only ever read one Famous Five book, and it was Five Go on a Hike Together. And that was, I feel like I've read all of the Famous Five books because everything everyone's ever told me about the Famous Five happened in Five Go on a Hike Together.
It's one of those things, if you've read one, you pretty much get the idea. You get the idea.
Yeah, basically, some kids are around. They're cool for their time. They go exploring. They pack a picnic. They have plenty of lashings of ginger beer, and then a bad guy gets caught. That's
ginger beer. It's true. Secret Seven as well. Enid Blyton.
Yeah,
Enid. Yeah, I read a lot of her books as a child. I know some of them now, as I look back as an adult, were quite problematic in their language and theme. But yes, her books as well. For sure.
And so, I mean, look, we've got a big wide variety of things that people can take away from that. Now, look, obviously, we've got to look to the future as well. What's coming up for Karl Nova in the near future? What can you tell us? Are things kept under wraps?
I'm working on book 3 right now, and because I think I wanted to make my poetry anthologies a trilogy before moving on to other types of books I want to write. So this is like the third in the anthology series of Rhythm and Poetry, The Curious Case of Karl Nova. Now we're landing in this book I'm writing right now. But I'm taking it away from myself because those first two are very personal. I'm taking it to a whole other thing. It's almost like a verse novel that I'm working on right now. And then there are other short stories and other things I'm writing about. Well, I can't talk about that one. I can tell you that I'm working on the third anthology. I'm very excited about it. And just so watch this space for that.
You were just telling me earlier before we came on air. It was writers never actually stop. You've been saying you've been trying to be more disciplined, to be more. I want to go off and do things for me for a little bit, and not be working.
Right.
And then suddenly something flies into your head, and you go, "Well, I better do that."
Well, you see, one of the things about me is I guess I'm a multidisciplinary artist. So if I'm not writing a book, I could be writing a song. If I'm not writing a song, I'm recording the song or shooting a music video, or writing poems, or writing stories. So I'm always doing something. So I have to learn to rest. I'm trying to learn to just take time off. But I don't know if that's possible.
I'm planning on taking time off when I'm about 85, I think. I'll just save it all up and have 15 years of just sitting still in a chair.
This is what I'm thinking. Yeah.
Karl, it's been lovely to talk to you today. Your book choices of Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe, Malcolm X is a biography by Alex Haley, and Go Tell It on the Mountain by James Baldwin will all appear on our author's bookshelf of children's choices. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Such a brilliant time talking to Karl a few days ago, and it was just it really enlightened me on a whole bunch of things, including sort of reevaluating my own sort of vision of who Malcolm X was and his life and his achievements. And yes, I'm definitely going to go and hunt out that autobiography at some point or another. Just brilliant as well talking to him about hip hop. And I think we need a listening party at some point or another because I think we're into very much the same kind of stuff. Of course, you can hear all of Karl's music as well. Go and track him out on things like Spotify and his own channels, etc. And he's produced some amazing work. Right, now it's the time in the podcast where we turn our attention to our teacher friends. Now, you remember that at the very first episode, we spoke to Robert, who was a recently retired teacher. He'd literally retired about a week before the podcast started, and so we had him on the show. We've now got you the opposite end of the spectrum. Literally, Victoria recently got her NQT status, and she is a newly qualified or recently qualified teacher, at least, within the last week or so. And so we grabbed the opportunity to see if we could find out what were her childhood memories of reading.
They gave me the impossible task of naming one of my favourite children's books. I've chose The Lion, Witch and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis. I mean, that is magical. I was probably a little bit older when I read that, but But what's quite funny about that novel is that it opened up so much imagination for me. I remember imagining opening my own wardrobe and walking into another world. And I really do think I tried it a couple of times and nothing ever happened. But the beauty about these books and the beauty about the escapism and the adventure, the thing that stuck with me mostly is even if I go out on a walk now, I see the beauty in nature. I see the animals. I can imagine animals talking. That's even as an adult. I still imagine things when I go for a nice walk about witches and fairies and wonder if there is a world beyond what we can see, which sounds absolutely ridiculous, I know. However, it's all part and parcel of the magic, and it's really broadened my creativity and imagination, and it helped me to become a creative writer.
Thank you very much indeed, Victoria. I know you had a bit of a tough time choosing those. The message you sent said you basically had 4 that you could whittle it down from, and you eventually settled on The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. It's such a brilliant, brilliant book. Thank you again for everybody for joining us. Just a quick note on next week's episode. We did publish that Hannah Gold would be joining us next week, but her timetable at the moment is a little crazy busy, getting some space in her diary for even breathing and thinking, I think is quite tricky. She is going to be joining us in a few weeks' time before the end of the series, though, so do not despair, fans of Hannah Gold. She is going to be joining us, but it will be a brilliant opportunity to speak to the great nature-based storyteller Danny English. He's going to be joining us next week to talk about his choice of books, so I'm really looking forward to that one. In terms of this week's episode, just to recap the books that we've talked about today, Ramona Forever by Beverly Cleary. That was my choice from my bookshelf. We had Luna Loves Gardening. Scotty chose that from the Reefer Empathy collection. That's by Joseph Coelho and Fiona Lumbers. Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. That was the first of Karl Nova's choices. Then he chose the autobiography of Malcolm X by Alex Haley and Go Tell It on the Mountain by James Baldwin. And then finally, of course, The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, the classic from C.S. Lewis, chosen by Victoria. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. We will be back with you next week on Raised by Writers.
If you'd like more information on today's podcast, you can contact Paul Jenkins on social media using the handle @TeacherWriterPJ. Raised by Writers is a Double Rainbow production.